In this video, we're going to be discussing labels. We're going to create and show you how to manage labels. We're going to apply, remove labels, and ultimately we're going to use them to filter, and I'll show you how to permission them as well. So let's just hop into the tool and do those things. So I'm here in Quincy. For labels to make any sense, you really have to be in a case, and so I'm going to go ahead and enter a case. And while that enters, let me show you some generic labels that are worth understanding regarding, generic permissions that are worth understanding. Sorry, a little tongue-tied there. Let me go ahead and we go to actions here. If you come down, you will see there are really three different permissions that pertain to labels. Label permissions can generally be ignored. This is only relevant for restricted viewers. And there's a whole video on restricted viewers, so you can refer to that if you want to know what this is about. But if you're just talking about labeling and stuff, just ignore it. Label objects, do you want to be able to attach labels? Do you want to be able to create labels? Now, the one important thing to note is that although I said there were only these three, and I've just sort of discussed these two, one of the most critical ones is right here, C tags. If you can't see tags, if your user can't see tags, it doesn't matter if you allowed them to create or label objects, they won't actually ever be able to see those labels. So you must also give them this permission. The last thing worth pointing out regarding permissions is the widget filters. Widget filters are all about the label permission. Are all about labels and facets and things like that. And you can see there's this whole section on tags. If you don't give the person access to labels right here, for example, then again, it really doesn't matter what you did with the other permissions because it's going to be really hard for them to see the labels that have been created or that they're trying to utilize. So both remember that there is this permission that's important as well as the other ones we just showed you in the action section. Okay, so we've been logged into our case and let's talk about the various places labels show up. Obviously, this is affected by the view you have. And labels show up in lots of different places depending on the differing views, but we're just going to focus on the desktop for right now. In the desktop, the labels are, as you can see right here, right up top. And if I click on them, I'll see all the different labels I have access to. There are a whole bunch of buttons here that are worth understanding. This will apply the label. This will remove the label. This will allow you to create a label. And then the final one shows the options associated with labels. So let me click on that and show you what I mean by that. These options are all related to labels, and they ask you whether you want to keep families together, keep threads together, similar together, links together, or click on don't ask and save if you don't want this dialog to constantly keep popping up. So this is probably one of the best places to go to utilize labels, but it doesn't really give you a sense of the organization of labels. You can see they're just all laid out here in a list. It's a searchable list, but it's just a list nonetheless. If you want to see the organization of labels, you want to go into the filter widget. And again, you must have been given access to tags and the label sub tag. Now, when we click on this, we can see all our labels in a much more intelligent fashion, meaning organized based on whatever foldering structure they have with them. And as with all the facets, you can right-click and you can do sort based on hits or based on alphabetical or whatever, and you could come up here and type and search if you want. But again, we're just going to stay focused on labels here. So you can see to the left of each label, is a box that will tell you whether the label is applied or not. Let me open up the grid and show you what I mean by applied. And let's go ahead and get labels in our view. So I'm just going to open up our custom columns. Again, if you're not familiar with this, there is a video on custom, our quick columns. There is a video on quick columns. Label, label name, label ID, I think is good enough. Let's just go ahead and do that. And let's see, make sure that popped up there. It did. And I'm going to pull it over here all the way to the right so we don't always have to be scrolling back and forth. There we go. Okay, so this will show you whether or not labels were applied to the various objects. We're going to go ahead and click on the box in the next to the Gov link, and you can see now that it is filtered on the 19 items that have the Gov label assigned to them. If I click again on this, it now removes the 19 items, but actually, to be clear, it did not remove the 19 items. I want to make sure you guys understand exactly what's going on with the not filter. The not filter for labels is a little odd at the moment, and I think it's something we're going to have to change, but you'll see there's the Gov. So some of these still have Gov. What happened is any object that was labeled with only the Gov label has been removed. But if in this case you have test, Gov, and fed, that still comes through, because what it's saying is if you only have the Gov label, remove the record. But if you have any of these other labels, you're still relevant because those, if you will, haven't also been removed. If I click a third time, it's going to go ahead and remove the filter entirely. I can also get the label filters by right-clicking on the grid. And then you'll see there's a whole section called labeling options. And there's the filter right there. So if I wanted to do very similar to what I've just done here and filter on Gov, I can just go ahead and do it here, exactly the same as I did it there. I'm not going to spend any time on that. Let me show you actually one other thing. I probably should have applied that label, but I can do it here. When I go ahead and apply this label, you'll see the indication that the label is applied pops up here. You can remove this label by just either doing what we had talked about here. You can also click here, or you can just go ahead and click here, and that will remove that applied label. All right, now let's talk about creating labels. I already said you could create them here, but you can also create them here. So if I right-click anywhere on here, it's going to pop up this right-click menu, and you'll see there's sort of label/issues, and it asks you, do you want to create a label folder or create a tag? Let's go ahead and create a label folder so you can see how that works. Now you have it will always refresh on you, and we just have our new label folder. We want to right-click. Let's rename that. Let's edit it. Excuse me. And we'll call it demo folder and hit return. Now let's create a sub label underneath it. And we're going to create a tag. So we right-clicked, we selected that folder, we right-clicked on it, and then we just did create. And again, it does that refresh, and it opens us up to the new tag. And we can go edit this, and we'll call it demo new tag. So now we can go start applying this, and you'll see immediately it is here in the there it is, demo new tag. Oops, I accidentally clicked there. Let's remove that. Well, actually, let me show you one thing about that. Is you'll see that this is I right-clicked on a folder. This is important to note. And it applied all the labels underneath. So you can, in fact, apply a folder label. But what you're really doing is applying all the sub-labels. So let's go ahead and remove that because I didn't actually intend to click on it. The last thing we want to talk about is permissioning of labels. If you're an administrator, of course, you can see all labels, but general users will only be able to see labels they've been assigned. To assign a label to somebody, right-click on it, and then go to Labels and go Permissions. All the different users that have access to this case will be here. You can go ahead and click on whoever it is you want to have access to this. If you want to include sub tags, if it's a folder, you can go ahead and do that. That will make sure that the sub tags all get included. And then you can just go ahead and save. If you want to give access to a group, obviously you can do that here as well. So those are the key things to understand about labels. We've shown you how you've applied them. We can show you, let's just quickly apply a label. Actually, let's do that because there's one other sort of sticky wicket that you should understand. So I've selected on the objects I wanted, just in this case, one object. I could also label by applying a filter and just hitting everything that's been filtered or search or whatever. But in this case, I'm just going to do this one. And I'm going to go ahead and click apply. And again, it pops up the options. I don't want to see this screen again, so I'm going to say don't ask again, and I'm going to hit save. Now, this is what I wanted to show you. You can see the label has been applied, but there's this red up here. This is to indicate that your local grid is out of sync with your database. In the context of labels, labels are a job, and if you are labeling, let's say, 30,000 records, it's not instantaneous. It can take some time for those 30,000 records to be actually labeled at the database level. The local labeling will occur almost instantaneously, but you'll have this sort of red here saying, hey, you're out of sync. You can wait for the job to finish. Eventually it will refresh, or you can just refresh manually and the red will go away. And now you can see it's the label we just applied is still there. If the database had not yet been updated, the label would be removed. So if I coded, let's say, labeled, let's say 20,000 records, and I immediately refreshed and I slid to the 20,000th record, I would see the label was gone from that one because the database hadn't yet been updated and I would simply need to wait. The other thing I wanted to show you is removing the label, exactly the same as applying label. You just click here and it will remove the label. Easy peasy. So let's just go ahead and do that. And there you see it removed it and we're out of sync again. And we can just, since it's just a single object, I'm pretty sure it will refresh properly. So there we go. Anyway, that's labeling. Hopefully that is helpful. It's a critical topic. And it's very important to the successful usage of Quincy because labels show up everywhere. They show up in your exports, they show up in productions, they show up all sorts. Anytime you want to group documents, you want to use labels to do that. So again, thank you very much, and I hope it was helpful.